Hello, my name is Kerstin Kremenberg. I'm Professor for Urban Studies at the Department of Geography and Regional Research at University of Vienna. I'm particularly interested in socio-environmental technical interactions in the context of sustainable urban development. I aim at systemic and integrated views on the complexity of cities. I therefore conduct inter- and transdisciplinary research, which includes close collaboration with individuals, institutions, and associations, involving many actors outside academia, such as urban planners, politicians, the private sector, and civil society. This video is about the challenges of cities in times of global crisis, but also about the opportunities to act locally. You will learn about cities' complexity and related concepts of urban vulnerability, adaptation to climate change, and urban sustainability transformations, while focusing on two global phenomena of the 21st century, urbanization and climate change. A quote from ex-UN General Secretary Ban Ki-moon from 2012 is particularly guiding for me. Our struggle for global sustainability will be won or lost in cities. Therefore, I will first explain why the interplay between urbanization and climate change is particularly challenging, and will go on to look at the opportunities for developing solutions. Cities contribute significantly to climate change. The contribution of cities relates to the high amount of CO2 emissions that are generated in cities, but also ongoing land use changes and the high consumption of resources, among others. This in turn has impact on cities. For example, on people's health, but also on the occurrence of climate-related hazards, such as floods or heat waves. When we look at the interactions between urbanization and climate change, we need to consider the complexity of urban spaces and their specific geographical, but also political, cultural, and social contexts. In sum, there are many other challenges, such as demographic, political, and economic change, or migration movements, that add to the complexity of cities and make the sustainable development of cities particularly challenging. One important aspect is that not all people living in a city are affected equally by these challenges. To find out who is particularly affected, why, and where, calls for urban vulnerability assessments. Here, urban vulnerability relates to people at a specific location, such as the place of living, or more broadly to the mobility between spaces of living, working, and leisure. This includes three dimensions of vulnerability. Exposure, which means, for instance, to be particularly exposed to a hazard because of a specific location within the city. Sensitivity, which is the probability of being harmed or not harmed. And coping capacities, such as the knowledge, but also the financial resources to cope with the impacts, or the existence of social networks. If we know who is particularly vulnerable, where and why, adequate measures for sustainable urban development can be taken. This relates to the adaptation to climate change in terms of effective context-specific adaptation measures. But what are adaptation measures? One important measure in terms of both flooding and heat waves is green infrastructure. Might be trees, green rooftops, green facades, and alike. Those show cooling effects, but also important retention effects, meaning that water can be absorbed. But also early warning systems and an appropriate risk management are important adaptation measures. Furthermore, mutual learning and education play a decisive role for effective climate change adaptation, which links to transdisciplinary approaches where urban actors outside academia are part of the adaptation discussion. It is argued that only through an exchange with the people who are affected and know why, but also with urban planners, politicians, and the like, who are responsible for the sustainability of cities, a common knowledge base can be developed. But given the complexity of cities, as pointed out earlier, adaptation alone is not enough to address the many challenges cities are facing. The question arises as to whether structural changes are needed that address the root causes of unsustainability or vulnerability more broadly. For example, social spatial inequality or the capacities of institutions to develop targeted adaptation measures. The discussion revolves about integrated solutions, but also around urban sustainability transformations. The latter relates to achieving radical changes and adjustments to urban conditions. It is about achieving change in value systems, regulatory, legislative, or bureaucratic regimes, financial institutions, and technological systems. In each case, social, cultural, economic, and political factors play a very important role. Often they are overlapping and interacting with each other, both spatially and temporally. This makes it also a particularly interesting research topic in geography and particular urban studies. Urban sustainability transformations require holistic approaches. These approaches need to tackle structural changes, interactions, and causalities when analyzing urban vulnerability. Urban sustainability transformations can therefore take place at different scales. For example, the 15-minute city, Paris, which implies fundamental changes to mobility and the use of urban open space on the entire city scale, and opening opportunities at meso and micro scale. On district level, the concept of superblocks can also be considered sustainable urban transformations. Superblocks are created or formed by closing off the inner streets of several blocks to cars so that all traffic is diverted to the outer streets. This comes with the opportunity to create attractive public space for and with the people living there, including green infrastructure, but without claiming extra urban space. Cities are particularly interesting places when we look at multiple crises. Due to their complexity, it is important to consider the root causes of the crisis. For example, in terms of urban vulnerabilities, to develop sustainable solutions. This calls for transdisciplinary approaches that bring different urban actors, their needs and perceptions together. Furthermore, climate change and the linkages to other crises need to go beyond climate change adaptation. More fundamental changes in terms of urban sustainability transformations are needed.